Welcome to This is Horror. This is a live podcast. I am Michael David Wilson. I'm joined as always by my co-host Bob Pastorella, and we have Laurel Hightower here because we are launching House of Bad Memories and Silent Key. Laurel, how are you doing?
I am great. I'm really glad to be here. I'm starting to sweat though now that you said it's live. For some reason, that automatically triggers this like, oh God, what am I gonna screw up like immediately? So maybe I'll just go ahead and get that out of the way. Maybe I'll, say
Well,
something inappropriate or burn something down accidentally.
I mean that there seems to be like fire in the background, but unfortunately it looks like it's electronic, so it would take some considerable effort to burn stuff down. But I have confidence in you. Or
They're like
the
training wheels. They're like training wheels for fire because I can't be trusted with actual fire anymore.
yeah. The other option is that if anyone's got like a remote, we can go funny games, we can rewind, and then I didn't say that we were live.
There we go. Then you could I would never know, and then honestly, I'd still screw something up. It's just I'd be less concerned about it because I would assume you could edit it out later. But yeah.
I would certainly hope so, but we'll have to find out. Well, we can't find out, can we? Because there's no remote
No,
unless you've got it,
there's no
Bob.
remote. Do
If
you have the
anyone would have a funny games remote, it would in fact be Bob Pastorella.
How are you, Bob?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm live and in person. So
Oh
I think
God, you
we
said
all
it
are.
again. I'm sweating even more.
Yeah,
Oh
Oh
yeah.
God, no.
What are you doing,
No.
Bob?
I didn't mean to make you sweat. Sorry.
no, it's all good.
That sounded way bad. So I'll go ahead and say, okay, it done fucked up already.
It only sounded bad at the point where you said it sounded bad. It was fine
As soon as I said it, I was like, well, whew, okay.
up until that moment, Bob. But I mean, the last time that we had like a long, full This Is Horror podcast conversation with you, Laurel, was in fact in August 2021. So over 2 years ago. So I want to know what have been the biggest changes for you, both personally and professionally, in that time.
Oh man. I guess let's see, 2021. So professionally, I've put out, I guess, 3 books since then. Because Below came out in March of 2022. That came out through Ghoulish imprint with Max and Lori Booth, who I believe you know quite well.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so that's been a fun ride doing that. And then, yeah, I put out my first collection in March of this year through Red Legos Press, Death Knell. And then, yeah, I had my first book came out with Flame Tree on Tuesday. So professionally, there's just been a whole lot of work. And then personally, God, I wish I could remember. It's I feel like it's like when you have a kid, you're just like, I don't know. I remember the birthday parties I've taken him to. I remember, that kind of stuff. But I think it's been pretty much status quo. I can't think of a whole lot other than just getting to do a whole lot of con travel, which has been a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the big thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, talking about, the release of Silent Key and talking about things that have been years in the making, I understand that this first started in 2017.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this has been a long time coming. What is the origin story with Silent Key and how did this first come about?
So I had finished, and I'm trying to remember, it might have actually been before 2017, but in any case, definitely by 2017. I had finished Whispers in the Dark, which is my first novel, and I had kicked it out to my agent, and I didn't want to just, you know, sit there and wait for him to email me, which is good because it took a really long time. So I started writing Silent Key, and that just sort of it kind of just stemmed from my husband. Just he is a He's an expert in many strange things, and one of them is vacuum tubes, the little glass tubes that you use
Mm,
for like sound equipment. And so he knows a lot about them, and he buys and sells them. And he told me that it's um it's a ham radio. You know, ham radios use those, and there's a ham radio term called a silent key. Which refers to an operator who's passed away. So he told me that he's like, that'd be a cool idea for a story, and I was like, indeed it would. So I wrote a book for a really long time, and I didn't even, dedicate it to him, which is
yeah.
just
Yeah. Oh well. Maybe next time. And for people watching live, this is one of the first times that we have used StreamYard. Brad Proctor, hello to you, sir. Y- Yeah, I noticed if I press this button, we can all see. He has said, "What's up, everyone?
Brad.
Congratulations on the release, Michael. Thank you very much, Brad. I will be on his show, Paper Cuts Live, very soon indeed. I believe that it's next week. Yeah, Friday, October the 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to hear even more from me, then, you can check out that too. If you're like, I've got even more House of Bad Memories questions. But you were on Brad's show earlier this week, in fact.
Yeah, Monday. Monday, I did a joint release with Bo Johnson, who has very kindly forgiven me for completely fucking up his giveaway. Um, I answered the question I wasn't supposed to. I need very direct instructions when anyone tells me to do anything, so just be aware. Sorry about that. Anything that you would think that a normal person would understand, go ahead and assume that I don't. So,
Yeah.
thanks, Bo, for being nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump back to Silent Key. I got distracted when I pressed the button and Brad's comment for like 1 second turned up on the screen. And then I thought I've really got to acknowledge that. But yeah, despite your husband's, pivotal help in, the title of Silent Key for one, the book wasn't dedicated to him.
Nope,
What on earth does he have to do to get a book dedicated to him? That
it's
that
never
might
gonna
be a
happen.
specific. He might be tuning in. This might be the
No,
question.
he's not.
No, well,
Don't worry, he's not.
he could be.
It's possible. I could find out at some point. He'll reveal that he's been listening to all my podcasts all this time, and like, I've heard you talking smack, and
Yeah,
it's time to have it out. Um, no, I actually like. I'm sneaky. Uh, my son was born a few months before my very first book came out, and so I have dedicated every book to him. And I'm gonna keep going with that because it's really easy. I use the same dedication every time. I don't have to worry about whether I'm gonna get this person or that person. That sort of struggle is for the acknowledgments, which I swear with every book get like longer and longer and longer. So yeah. So it's always gonna be to Tiny.
yeah, yeah. Well, that seems fair enough. And when we first set about doing this event, really the reason that we paired House of Bad Memories and Silent Key together, it was no other reason than, the fact that we both had books coming out at the same time.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why not, quite frankly? But actually, in reading Silent Key, there's a lot of like thematic parallels now in terms of like the writing and the story, very different. But I mean, we've both got like the death of somebody close to the protagonist. We've
Hmm.
both got hidden secrets from the past, and they're both very much dealing with navigating parenthood in less than ideal circumstances. So there are a number of parallels between these two titles.
That's true. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. And particularly with the especially with House of Bad Memories, the way that everything spins out as far as those secrets go, I feel like they're so far reaching. They're so far reaching, which is fun.
Yeah, yeah, well, thank you very much. And your protagonist, Cam Ambrose, former detective, but sometimes people call her detective, and she likes that. She is such a kind of badass and no nonsense character. When did she come to you in the process of putting this one together?
I feel like she might have been second. I feel like Demi came first. Um, Demi is her, for anyone who hasn't read it, he is the main character's sort of adopted Russian brother. He's a gangster. She met him on an undercover operation, and they just sort of started hanging out together, and they're like family. And he's one of my favorite characters that I've ever written because he's an absolute jackass, and I just love that about him. I realize that some of my very favorite people in the world are just massive jackasses, and I just admire that about them. So I got to kind of put that in the story. But yeah, I feel like Demi maybe came first, and I liked the idea of their pairing. I liked the idea of this sort of not exactly straight edge person in Cam, but this more sort of like somewhat normal one who's just, kind of collects people. Um yeah, so I mean, I almost feel like I've lived with these characters so long that I have no idea. I don't have a clear idea of their origination because I just feel like they've been with me for so long. If I would
Yeah.
finish books faster, that probably wouldn't be the case.
Right, but I imagine with this book that you must have written several stories in between, just purely because of the amount of books that you've had out recently, and thinking about Below and Crossroads, and I know you've got another forthcoming one from Ghoulish, and as we said, this started in 2017. So
Yeah.
just my understanding is you must have either parked it for a bit or had several projects on the go at once.
I parked it. I actually finished the first draft of this, years ago. It was like 200,000 words, which is outrageous, and really had a lot of stuff that needed cut from it. So I would kind of like do some revisions on it, and then I would kind of set it aside. But I didn't really start working on the types of projects like Below and Crossroads until Whispers in the Dark had already come out.
Mm,
And then I just sort of, I don't know, I feel like I got a better idea of what horror could be.
mm.
Um, and I realized it kind of didn't have, I loved writing this book. And actually, I love reading it. It's the only one of my books that I've ever written that I enjoy going back to read. Like everything else, once I publish it, I'm like, I'm not touching you again, just in case I run into a typo. So you're off in the world now. We're not gonna ever speak again. But this one, I still do. But it was with Crossroads that I kind of realized, like, oh, there are other ways to tell a story here. There are shorter ways to tell a story. There's like more direct ways, and I feel like Whispers in the Dark was very much a learning experience, and with Silent Key, I was still learning. And so yeah, it's gone through kind of a number of iterations and just been parked from time to time.
And I wonder what is it that makes you, enjoy returning to this one, but you don't want to even look at a sentence from the other ones. And kind of related, is this your most personal book? It kind of feels like it might be.
In some ways it is, yeah. I I would probably say that like overall my most personal book is probably Crossroads. Um, but Silent Key just has the thing that I love about novels, and the thing that I almost forgot about what I loved about them is the chance that you get to immerse yourself with the characters. And Um, I really got a chance to really just like get to know these characters very well. The male lead, Eric Morgan, was very different in when I was initially like putting this together. He was sort of like a put together, cool, like older guy, who was like, knew what he was doing, and then he was like, no, I'm actually a socially anxious fuck up. I can't be that guy. So I've just had more of an opportunity to just kind of like be with them, and I am a sucker for romance. So I love being able to have that romance aspect of, you know, Eric's relationship with Cam in this. And confession, I've also written like several other manuscripts within this series, I guess. And that I think is part of it is I've, even if I'm the only one that's read them, I've continued their story. And so they're just, I don't know, they're just kind of close to me in that way. So yeah, I mean, as far as personal, as far as like a connection to it, as far as how close I feel to it, yeah, I think you're right. I think Silent Key probably is the one for now. We'll see.
You just said that you've written several others within this
Yes.
series. So what yeah,
Mhm.
Bob's nodding. What
I
what
got
can you
that.
tell us?
Yeah.
Yeah, what can you tell us about those? And do you think it's likely that we're going to see them in the world? Will we see some iteration of them? Just tell me all you can about the silent key world, for want of better terminology.
Well, it was sort of the same thing. I got done with Silent Key and I was like, well, I'm still not just going to sit here. And I didn't plan to write a series, but then I kind of was coming up with the next story I wanted to work on. And I was like, actually, they kind of fit into this pretty well. So I wrote a second one in it, which is, I'm sure it's a title that I wouldn't keep, but it's just called The Flyer's Last Words. And it's about plane crashes, and it's about the National Transportation and Safety Board, like investigation kind of things, and how that definitely can play into some of the supernatural aspects that I enjoy wedging into everything that I write. So yeah, I wrote that one. I continued their story, introduced some new characters. And just really had a blast with that. And then I just kept going after that. I wrote a third one. All of these are going to require like a massive amount of of editing and probably rewrite from the ground up. Because a lot of the like backstory changed in writing Silent Key. Uh, your friend and mine, Ryan Lewis, gave just some absolutely magnificent notes on the manuscript, and he really, like, in a way that no one else was able to, he was able to sort of like lay out for me like, okay, this is where it's dragging, this is what you need to cut, this is how you simplify. So I rewrote Silent Key from the ground up, and that also meant I changed some of the backstory. So yeah, um the second one is the plane crash one. The third one has to do with uh some stuff with Eric's family, and then with some grave robbing and various things like that. So yeah, and then I'm about halfway through. I haven't written on it in a while, but I'm halfway through the fourth one, which is extremely Demi centric, which is enjoyable for me because I love Demi. I like getting to put him front and center. So I don't know whether they'll ever make it anywhere. I guess it just kind of depends on how Silent Key goes, on what kind of reception it gets, whether it seems like it's something that anybody wants to explore any further.
Well, fingers crossed. I think the world will be a better place for more silent key and dimmy in the world.
Well,
But
thank you.
I mean, yeah, Ryan Lewis, who you mentioned, he's so instrumental, as not just a film manager, but as like a kind of critic and first reader, because his
Hmm.
notes are always, they're so precise, but they're never kind of over prescriptive. He'll tell you a bit that he
Yeah.
thinks needs improving, but he won't necessarily say how to do it, which
Mhm.
makes things so much easier. Because I mean, we have like Neil Gaiman's kind of famous advice is, if somebody tells you something's wrong, they're almost certainly right. If they tell you how to fix it, they're almost certainly wrong. So Ryan just, he doesn't even bother with the
Yeah.
second part, which is great. But I mean, yeah, he made some notes on House of Bad Memories that certainly like just improved the story, but it's actually difficult to talk specifically about them without giving some things away. But I mean, literally that the last scene, the like kind of conclusion, it it was set in a different location originally. And
Hmm.
because of something that Ryan said, I thought, right, I can change the location, and it just made everything so much better. And
Oh, that's
unfortunately,
nice.
that's all I can really say on that particular note.
All right, I'm gonna ask you off air then, because I'm interested. I'm very interested to know what he said about it. Because I don't know. I've well, and of course, I guess it always seems that way when you're not the one who wrote it. But like the entire manuscript of House of Bad Memories it just flows so perfectly, and every single part seems like it would have to at every point have been that, because it just I mean, it's completely fucked up. Like, you're never expecting like any of it. You're like, what? But it's like, especially when you get to the conclusion, you're like, Jesus Christ, okay. No, that was the ride. That was how the roller coaster was always going to go. So that's very interesting to me. I'll be interested to know what notes Ryan made on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can
Mhm.
do that off air, and perhaps we can even do a kind of like Rob Olson used to do this with booked podcast, but spoiler talk. So we can have a kind of separate video where it's like, right, if you have read the book, or for some reason you enjoy books being like spoiled, that's your kink, then oh boy, this is the video for you. But I mean, another note that Ryan made, which again I have to be really subtle talking about, so I'm not sure how great a listening experience this is, but there was something that, like, my foreshadowing had been too subtle, so I just had to turn it up slightly more so that it didn't kind of come out of nowhere. Now, like, a lot of people, have said, and like I really love it, that many plot points feel like they come out of nowhere. But if you go back and reread, then there's like little breadcrumbs. So I just had to throw a few more breadcrumbs into the trail to, make it work. And again, that's the Ryan Lewis effect.
It is.
Mhm.
He's got the
And
Ryan Lewis touch. But yes, everything in House of Bad Memories is very earned. Like, none of it's like, oh, this twist that has no basis of anything. You're not expecting any of it. But that's why it's like, when you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, yeah, that had to happen that way. But holy shit.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Do you find that you send all of your stories to Ryan Lewis now?
No, I don't. I feel like he would probably block my email address if I ended up doing that to him. But I send him things that either we've had media interest on, or that I'm trying to get a gauge for whether it would be worth attempting an adaptation on. Um, and yeah, so I mean, he's read the latest that I have for Max. He's read that. And then, yeah, I'll send him some of my short stories and things like that. But yeah, I'm trying to think. And now I feel like I don't even write that much, but I don't think that's true. It feels like I write a hell of a lot. But I'm also like very Southern, and I'm like, I don't want to bother anybody. So
Right.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Right.
The thing that I like about his feedback, of course, me and Michael have been, going back and forth with him on a script, and it cuts to the bone. I mean, it's precise, and it really kind of sets you on where to go without explaining how you do it. You have to do it yourself, and you once you figure out what you need to do, it makes it to me. It makes the writing stronger. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, but yeah, his feedback is direct and to the point. And it's like, if something ain't working, he's going to tell you it's this doesn't work at all. And I like that. And he doesn't beat around the bush. And
No,
most of the editors I've worked with don't beat around the bush, but I have worked with some that, they could not explain what they were trying to say.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's one of those skills that not everybody has, like sometimes someone can be a really great writer, but have no idea how to communicate that to someone else if they're attempting to beta read or give notes or anything like that. And I feel like Ryan just has that really excellent capability of being able to pass that on. Silent Key, like, it was just the biggest problem with it was that it was always too long.
Mm,
And so I would go through it from time to time, and I would cut out things, and I'd get it like as short as I could, and then I would feel like, well, there's nothing else I can cut. And when Ryan read it, what he did for me was he kind of helped me walk backward through it. he read a scene that he was like, okay, this is what should be your exact 50% mark. And it's not, he's like, so what you need to use is this is your like guide, your guidepost. This should be 50%. And then he told me to sort of like, and I always write scene plans. I usually write one when I outline to get sort of a general idea of how I want to proceed. And then when I'm done and I'm working on edits, I do a scene plan to make sure that there is actually action and purpose, that everything is forwarding the plot. And if I do my scene plan, I'm like, yeah, I don't see any point in this, then I know I have to cut that one. And he told me sort of after the fact, he wanted me to make a list of all of my essentially plot points. And he's like, and what you need to do is go back and unthread whatever you can, whatever you don't have to have. And when I when I made my list of plot points, it was like 27. I was like, that's too many. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of plot points. So I don't know, just he has that, it just makes me think of like taking algebra in school. Like you can have somebody who's like brilliant and is like the most brilliant mathematician, but if they don't know how to pass that on and they don't know how to explain it to you, it's not very worthwhile from a teaching perspective. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff comes from I read a book about that kind of stuff called story engineering. I can't remember who wrote it,
Ooh,
but
story
they
engineering.
kind
Is that,
yeah.
is that Larry Brooks?
I think so. I think that might be who wrote it. But and a lot of it comes from just basic, if you're writing a story, it's the same as writing a movie, and so you have certain points that are just natural that are going to be, not formulaic, but you need to have, certain things happen. It's like how he reverse engineered the story from the 50% mark,
Yeah.
And that's, I do that. I don't tend to plot. Spoiler alert! I just on the one I'm working on now, I actually plotted. So I'm growing as a writer. Yay!
How do you feel about it though? Do you like it? Because
It
I also
wasn't.
know plenty of writers who've tried the plotting and they're like, wow, that sucked all of the fun out of everything we just did. So
Well,
what's
that
your
had been my
thought?
problem before because it's like I would go into too detailed with the plot, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, I don't write the book. I already wrote it. I got 30 pages of notes here, buddy. Publish this, But I kept it very undetailed. That was the key. When I went into it, I was like, I'm going to keep each sentence in this thing as short as possible, just to get the essence down. And I think, I mainly wanted to write it that way because there's some things that have to happen. And the way it's structured is it takes the course of over 4 days. So I'm expanding, so it's 4 parts, multiple chapters within each part. And I have to, basically we're going through, a whole 24-hour period. And so
Oh,
what hours do I want to do in there? I don't want to have 24 chapters, So I've got to, figure out how to make time, fly, how to make it expand, how to make it collapse, how to make it, tighter. And so I wanted to make sure that I've got these scenes where I want them, but that reading that story engineering has got me trained, I hope, to know that, hey, this has to happen. And I need to have it happen now because it's going to, create a gap or a lag. The story's going to drag until I get to, to the 50% mark. And so, I have to know what those points are, and
yeah.
whether I'm plotting or not, whether I'm actually writing an outline, I have to know what those points are. And between that and using the old, South Park method, which it's not even their method, I just call it that because I think it's cool. But to use, but or therefore instead of and then between your plot points. Because that creates a dynamic instead of just having things happen and happen and then this happen and then this happen, But if you have but and therefore, you between your plot points, then you're creating a dynamic that is storytelling. That's and your greatest stories kind of follow that format.
I'm stealing this. I'm sorry. I'm putting a little note in my phone about the story engineering because I will never remember that, but I want to pick that up. Um, that sounds really useful.
Yeah, I mean, in books like that, you have to really kind of take what you need out of it.
Oh yeah.
There's probably some stuff in there that you might find that doesn't jive with the way that you work, the way that you write. But I got into a little bit of a slump. I wanted to get out of it, so I started reading, writing books again, and I kind of looked over that one because I read some of the reread Matt Bell's book, Refused to Be Done, which that helped me, kind of get an idea how I wanted to do an outline, because I've never, like I said, I've done them before, and the last two, Mojo Rising was no outline. All I had was songs. I just took Doors songs and said, okay, these are like 10 of my favorite Doors songs. I'm going to write a book based upon these songs. And then, with their watching, Michael wrote the outline. We kind of wrote it, he won't work without one. So I was kind of forced, but with the Small Hours, which is out on submission, there was no outline. There kind of was, but I don't want to spoil anything. So it riffs off the a What If from an extremely popular story that's in public domain. So it's just a what if based on
It's Winnie the Pooh, isn't it?
No,
It's got to be Winnie the Pooh. No?
No. It's not Poe either.
Oh, okay.
No. So.
Yeah, by all accounts, the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey film did not go well. I have not watched it. I have not watched it. No,
I'm
but
not going to watch it.
Yeah, it doesn't really hold much interest for me, to be honest. But
I listened to a podcast breaking it down, and I feel like I've heard what I need to hear. Someone else, did that for me.
I mean, from the reviews that I've heard, it may have arguably been more entertaining to have listened to people breaking it down than to have actually watched the film. Hope that the writer or actors in this film don't somehow stumble upon this podcast.
That has happened to me when I've guested on Final Guys before. We were like ripping up this movie that was on Tubi, and like one of the supporting actresses was like there listening. I'm like, oh God, I should never speak again. But
yeah,
it was Titanic 666. It was really bad.
You're doing it again. You're like, just in case.
Just in case you showed up again, girl. Look, you did fine. I'm just saying, as a movie, it was bad.
Yeah.
You deserve better, supporting actress girl.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to say, anyway, we know that, there's no book or no film that is for everyone. And, every single book that I've written, somebody has trashed it and absolutely hated it, and that will continue indefinitely. Also, luckily, there have been people who have absolutely loved it, and I think that's fine. And not only is it fine, I think that's the way that it should be with art. It would be bizarre, if everyone universally loved or hated a particular book or film. But to get back to, plotting or pantsing, I mean, as Bob points out, I do pretty much plot everything. But like I speaking to Josh Malaman about this, but I feel that a lot of us are what I would call a kind of hybrid, where we're doing something halfway between plotting and pantsing. So I mean, I will plot it from start to finish, but then I give myself kind of creative license to add things in and to just see where the story goes within the writing. Now, in the book that I'm working on at the moment, called Together Forever, I started writing that originally as kind of my most commercial of books from the plan. Yeah, then when I started writing it, it's like, yeah, but you're also the one writing it, so your brain doesn't work in a commercial way. So it's like a psychosexual thriller, kind of like if Adrian Lynch wrote a book, let's say. But the plot, it was too safe almost. And the moment where I added the calisthenic sex cult was the moment where I knew that this is not commercial anymore. This is what my brain decided would be a good idea for the main character, who is an editor of a fitness magazine, a men's fitness magazine. I thought it would be interesting if he had the leader of a calisthenic sex cult turn up for an interview, and it descended into, yeah, it descended. Maybe that's the end of the sentence.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking about every gym I've been a member of, and I'm like, yeah, that tracks actually.
Yeah.
It brings a whole new meaning to side straddle hop. But
Oh God.
Did you just come up with that on the fly? Well done. Nice.
Yeah. But now I've got kind of the opposite problem. But if I think about it, this is how most of my stories work anyway. I come up with a tight plan. Then within the writing, it just turns into something completely else. And then after that first draft, or sometimes halfway through the first draft, I have to then go back and distill it more into the story's essence. So, it's like the question at the moment is like, how can this still be salvageable, but we can, keep the spirit of the calisthenic sex cult? Because there's an unknown writer's rule that once you mention a calisthenic sex cult, you can't take it out of the book.
No, you can't. And it's one of those things. It's use it or lose it. You bring in the calisthenic sex cult. You got to make the most of it.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure as writers, we've all got a calisthenic sex cult story, but we'll have
Who
to
among
leave
us?
that.
Who among us does not?
Yeah. I mean, for many people listening, it's like, goodness, which one shall I tell? It's like running through your mind there.
I've got categories of
feverishly.
it.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm curious then, when you were writing House of Bad Memories, was it
Mhm.
something that started out feeling more commercial and then it became the layers of what the fuckery that it is today? How did that, I mean, how did that go forward? Or was it always like, yeah, this is going to be off the rails?
Okay, so there's two kind of parts to that question. Okay, firstly, apart from the book that I'm talking about, there is probably at least two releases into the future, so it is somewhat ridiculous that I'm now going back to Together Forever, possibly trying to promote a book that I guess won't be out for 3 years, but
There's a long lead time in this profession. So.
Yeah, but that is the only time really that I have initially set out to write something even vaguely commercial. As you can tell, it didn't work out for me. I haven't even finished the book, and it's like, well, it's not commercial anymore. The only reason I started doing something like vaguely commercial was I was looking at querying different literary agents, and the next book that I had after House of Bad Memories was Daddy's Boy. And Daddy's Boy, I mean, even the title gives you an idea. It's kind of like The Greasy Strangler meets a Joe R. Lansdale heist novel, if set in Guy Ritchie's incompetent Britain, let's say. And so
Can you please start doing my comps for me? Because like yours are like, when I saw the comps for House of Bad Memories, I was like, with elements of Rosemary's Baby, the fuck. And then I was like, no, accurate, all of that, completely on point, completely on point. So in future, I'll send you some bourbon if I can just give you you give me my comps.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe I should branch out with a comp service. I've got editorial services, I've got story overview, but if there's a demand for the comp service, then maybe
comps. And if you can do synopses, back cover blurbs, you will be rolling in money.
Yeah, no, I tend to find that I'm quite good at writing a synopsis for a story. The trouble is writing the story itself. It's like I can make it sound really good. Now I've got to actually make sure that the book itself is good. But fingers crossed at the moment, people are reacting to House of Bad Memories favorably. So I'm appreciative of that. But to go back to the original question, so I mean, House of Bad Memories, it was very much a book that was written in two halves. So initially, it was going to be a standalone novella, and I I had a publisher lined up for it. Now, for various reasons, it didn't work out. I've no problem with that publisher. I actually think that they're pretty good because it'd be quite easy to find out who who it was with. So I want to make clear that that they didn't do anything wrong. It was just like a kind of conflict of like just what I wanted from the book and what they couldn't do. So it was as simple as that. But when I got the rights back to it, it was like, well, what do I want to do with this now? Now, this does a little bit tie into commerciality. So Ryan Lewis, who may be a recurring character in in this podcast, he had read the initial novella. He really enjoyed it, but he wasn't sure like how could he sell it, how could he pitch it for the screen, because it was quite understated, not so much anymore, and like very British. Yeah, very single location at the time, which for people who have read it, that will to me it seems very obvious where one book ends and the second half starts. But I mean, he said that he didn't think it will be an easy sell for the screen. So I thought, well, I wonder if I can expand this into a longer story. The answer being yes. And then if I can make it more sellable for the screen, possibly because of some sections, chapter 22, I'm looking at you. The answer to that was no. Now you have made it even harder to sell. But at the point that I had expanded it, I was already completely sold on that idea. So I mean, yeah, this is what I mean, where sometimes like I will think how it could be more commercial. And so there might be a plan where it's a little bit commercial, but then when the so-called gold turns up, yes, I'm referring to chapter 22 as gold, then it's like I like that idea so much that I'm like, no, there's no way that isn't going in. So it's almost like I write something somewhat commercial and then I make sure that it's not commercial at all. Maybe I just enjoy pain, and I don't know.
You use it as a prompt,
Yeah.
You start with the prompt, and then you give it the Michael David Wilson treatment. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think as well, like I want things to be original and unexpected and things that people haven't seen in a story before. So it's like if I'm coming up with like, let's say like a torture method or a fight scene or something like that, I don't want to go for something that everyone has seen before. The feedback would be that I accomplished that. There was no one who said, oh, that
It's been
torture scene,
done.
not
been
again.
done. Yeah.
Bloody hell, he's that like trope. No, it'd be funny to me, at least with my sense of humor, if that became a trope. I don't think it will.
There'll be
I
in
don't
the
think
little section at
Ramsey
Barnes and
Campbell
Noble.
is writing that into his next book, or Ellen Datlow is commissioning anthologies based on that highly specific method, shall we say?
God, what would the title be?
Do it like the Swedes? I don't know.
That'd be good because it gives away nothing.
Or
What are
you
they
could
talking about,
just call it
massage or?
Drink Up.
Oh, yeah, there's the one.
Yeah.
There's the one. Bob,
Yeah.
your face is just no. I disapprove
Yeah.
of everything going on
Well,
here.
well, let me bring Bob into this. I don't know if Bob even remembers this, and I haven't said this on a House of Bad Memories interview yet, but it feels apropos that we do this at the launch. But that particular scene, also for people who haven't read it, which is possibly the majority, I like that we're creating kind of mystique, and hopefully it will live up to it. But nearly everyone who read that, you know, the beta readers, they were like, oh, this is gross. Why did you do this? I can't remember specifically what Bob said, but it essentially equated to, I think you can go further. so Bob is it was like, okay, you're calling my bluff now.
That's how you know you have your people.
Yeah. So, you know, like I took it further based on, like, you know, maybe even some one-upmanship from Bob being like, you can do better than that. You can go further. So, I mean, what we have with that chapter is like, we have the spirit of Jack Ketchum in The Girl Next Door, where he says, like, I won't describe what happens next. And then that's the end of the chapter. So that's my little homage to Jack Ketchum. However, unlike Jack Ketchum, after saying that, I then tell you all the things I won't describe. So I kind of tell you I won't and then promptly describe it.
Yeah.
Like, here you go. Here's your information.
Yeah, there's the fake out.
But it, you know, going away from being commercial to being, you know, something that I think it's going to be memorable and something people are going to, it's to me, I think it's just a better book. You know, I'm going through, like, with my the book I have out sub right now. You know, I mean, there was a point to where it could have been a YA book. But you throw in, sexy, naked, lesbian vampires, and suddenly it's not a YA book anymore. And so that's, you have to make those decisions, and there's no way I'm cutting that scene out. I mean, it's to me, it's just that, it's professional integrity. It's like, well, I might tone it down if somebody gave me a good contract for a YA, but it's, bikini clad, sexy vampires, but okay. But it doesn't work. It ain't going to work. But I mean, those things happen. They're like strokes of genius. It's like, this is what this needs. And it's like the last thing you should possibly ever do. But to me, it's like, this is one of the best scenes in the whole book, And so when you make those decisions, and I'm going to go like Michael, I'm going extreme on here, then it's like, well, fuck commercialism. It's like, you got to make yourself happy. You got to live up to your own expectations. And I don't think it would be a Michael David Wilson story unless it had some type of extremeness to it like that. There's some stuff in the book that I just read, Daddy's Boy, while funnier, it's pretty fucking extreme. I mean, it's like, I don't see that one being commercial. It could be, very could be.
Well, we just need to change what commercialism is,
Yeah,
exactly.
If we change the definition of commercial.
No, but if you look at what, like, I read this blew me away, and I read this like probably 30 years ago. They had a list of things that you needed to have an international best-selling book, and we're talking mainstream, okay? And so one of the things that somebody listed out the 10 things that they found in common with every international, thriller, mainstream type book, mystery, romance, whatever. And 2 things stuck out to mind: extreme violence and gratuitous sex. And I'm like, okay, that almost makes no sense that these books that are national, international bestsellers have extreme violence in them and gratuitous sex. Yet this is the thing that the genre books get nailed upon, crucified on for being too extreme and having gratuitous sex. So I'm like, it seems, quite hypocritical at that point. And it made me realize that I really didn't want to be a best-selling writer. Because, the books that I was reading, I tend to stray away from the general and go to, to more extreme. Thank God for small press,
Right.
I would have
Definitely.
nothing to read,
Yeah.
but that's where you're going to find the best stuff, to me. But it just blew my mind that was things that they found in common. And it took me a while to realize that it's the tone. It's the tone that makes it to where you can put those things to where they're acceptable in mainstream books. It's the tone of it.
There's also maybe a sense of safety, I guess, for people who don't really read horror. Like I feel like with horror, anything can happen. And
Mhm,
there are some people that just their thresholds are different, and they need that safety of knowing, like, okay, there might be violence, there might be, some gruesome murders, there might be some gratuitous sex, but there's not going to be XYZ level of imagery, that they're gonna have trouble with or something. Because I know that some of it is just we're kind of the redheaded stepchild, genre, to an extent. I went to my very first, like, non-genre event. It was like a book fair in a smaller, outlying city near me, and I had never done that before, and I kind of forgot the whole, like, sneer that you get from people when they're like, "Oh, what are you writing?" It's like, "This is horror," and they're like and you're like, okay, I didn't chase you down. That's weird, but it's also like I think that it's because people have that they have some of them have an almost inherent fear of interacting with something like that in a way that's going to disturb them.
mhm.
So, yeah, but I mean to back to what you said, yeah, thank God for small press cuz the rest of us want to read it. So,
Yeah, I don't think I could. I went to a book fair with Max and Laurie. It was one of the first ones I went to years ago, and we kind of got a little bit of that because it was a book fair, it wasn't horror or anything like that. Uh, but I know Max has kind of lamented on this, a lot. It's like a lot of these, you go to comics and things like that, and if people out there, it's like, oh, look, they got actual books, it's like that Bill Hicks skit, what you reading for, and it's like, it's like, well, yeah, it's a book fair, I mean, why would you not have books here? It looks like we got ourselves a Rita, and that's just like, what the hell, man? It's like, but that's that stigma that you write horror, don't read it, don't like it, don't read it. It's pretty simple.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah. But
chasing
it.
anybody down with it, but,
Mm,
Hmm.
mm. If we go back to, I guess, what originally started this thread of the conversation when we were talking about, the dichotomy as to whether to write in a commercial
mm,
way. I mean, I don't know how it is for both of you, but in the rare instances where I've even attempted to make something more commercial, it just feels inauthentic. And then also added to that, it feels more like work in a way
yes.
in which like I never got into creative writing for. Like I think we want to remember the reasons that we originally did this, and probably it was just for the joy of writing. And
Yeah.
that's why I kind of try to think about this idea that if you can find joy in writing, then no matter what happens, you've already won. So
Mhm.
find happiness in the pursuit of doing, not in how much it sells, not in how much money it makes, not in how many awards you get, but can you just find the pleasure in writing? If you do, every story will be a success because the writing is the success. And yeah, that's why, I mean, I just have to write something that's authentic, and it might not be very commercial, but it will certainly be a better story if I'm writing it from an authentic and an honest place. And
Yeah.
so that is the only way that I can do it in a way that will bring me joy. Of course, you do think about the marketing and the selling, but that comes after. That is not to be thought about in the creative process. You can think about how you can sell it. That's how those like comp titles and the synopses come into play. But that is work after that should be separate to the writing. So if you're authentic, then you will be writing the best possible story that you can. And if you think about all the kind of big successes, they typically came out of nowhere. It wasn't because they were kind of copying an existing model. So you might as well do something that's authentic. You might as well do something that brings you joy. You've already won. If you're doing it for the money, then just do something else. If it's primarily for the money.
Yeah. I mean, definitely always, you know, be paid for what you
Yeah.
do. But yeah, there's a difference there in, am I writing this specifically so that I can appeal to, a large audience that maybe I don't even particularly understand? Because, Bob, like you were talking about, when somebody does that research and sort of breaks down like, oh, these are the common elements of these successful books. It's like, I don't really even enjoy those kinds of books though. Like, to me, they're so formulaic,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just sort of comes back to the original tenet of, you write something because you want to read it, because what you want to read isn't out there. So you write the thing that you want to read. And if you're writing something that you don't even want to read, let alone write, yeah, it's completely stripped the fun out of it. And I think we probably have all, had those instances where maybe we were writing for a call or writing for something spec, and then I mean, I guess I shouldn't speak for everyone, but for me, it's like sometimes I'm like, like my brain just kind of shuts down when I'm trying to tell it what to write, as opposed to letting it kind of spin out of where it wants to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's something to say too for being authentic. You can find commercial success and still be authentic. Joe
Oh
Lansdale
yeah.
wouldn't have a career, at the level he is without being authentic. And there's two other writers I can think of. Right off the bat, Paul Tremblay and Stephen Graham Jones. Neither one of them have compromised anything in their voice at
Violet
all.
Castro. Violet
Another
Castro is
one.
who immediately comes to mind, because
Mm-hmm.
all of her work is very violet. It's all very violet, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very, middle fingers up, machetes out, you
Mm-hmm.
know, this is what I'm writing, and it's completely authentic, and it's really, it's appealing to people. And I guess in a sort of tongue in cheek way, that's sort of what I mean with like changing commerciality. It's like, how do people even know what they want if all they see is the same bullshit?
Mm-hmm.
If the only thing that's on the shelf is James Patterson for the 433rd time, they don't know what's possible. I know I didn't know what was possible with horror until I really sort of delved into indie horror. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh, there is a lot to this."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's she comes to mind. Another writer, Gabino Iglesias,
Oh yeah.
he hasn't compromised anything.
No.
They haven't. As a matter of fact, that's probably what got them to the level that they're at, is because they have a no compromise, level to their writing, that they're not gonna, you're gonna take it or someone else will, you know. And to me, that's, that's I feel like that's the key to their success, is having that voice. And but the bad thing is that for writers coming up, they're gonna be like, well, we want you to kind of sound more like X, and it's like, no, I'm not going to, um, you might be tempted to do that, but I mean, you can't emulate someone's style. It's, to me, I feel like it's impossible. You can mimic it, at a superficial level, but that's that, to me. I feel like that in commercial, especially in horror, they're going to be more writers trying to, or more publishers trying to find a unique type of voice, and that's where your strength's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got some readings that we're going to do. So, as it is the hour mark, or will be in 10 seconds, I believe that this is an excellent time to jump into some of the readings. So, I've got a reading that I'm going to perform with Laurel, and I believe, Laurel, you also have a reading. So, would you like to go first, or would you like the double team first, which is
Let's
better?
let's let Bob
Bob,
pick.
shut up, Bob. His eyes at that point. Just shut up.
We'll let Bob pick because I don't know that I can't even make that decision. All right, which one first, Bob? It has no bearing on we're not going to accept it as any sort of opinion on anything. Just throw one out.
Ladies first.
That works. There's a good way. All right, so I kind of cut and adapted a short story that is included in my collection. Every Woman Knows This. This story is Starman. The third time I saw my Starman, he took my mother away. I was 12, an awkward age, and I spent most of my time crying or trying not to. School, home, it didn't matter. I was thin skinned with no social skills and received ample evidence on a daily basis that I wasn't getting anything right. All I wanted to do when I finally escaped to my upstairs room was lay on my bed and listen to music. Tori Amos, Sheryl Crow, Alanis Morissette, and the Crow soundtrack. Music to help me sink into sadness while I contemplated whether the future held anything better for me, or if I was staring down the barrel of decades of the same. I didn't even play my music that loud, but my peace was always short lived. Things got out of hand that night, like they often did. Always my fault. I didn't have the right answers, the ones I should have known, and everything I said fanned the flames of my mother's smoldering temper. By then, I was taller than her by an inch or so, and my depressive eating meant I probably outweighed her or came close. Still, I cowered in her presence, her fury an unknown beast with unknowable limits. I remember wishing, maybe even praying for her to go away and leave me alone. Just stop screaming, stop spraying my face with spittle and backing me into a corner the way we always ended up. I remembered that later, that I had prayed. He stood before either of us knew he was there. Between one breath and the next, he was looming shadow at my shoulder. I looked down and saw his boot aligned with my own bare foot, felt his cold at my back, and my memory returned. This time I didn't flinch from him. I remembered the way he'd faced the changeling of hatred that inhabited my mother from time to time, and how that empty black glass of his helmet had tamed her, taken the fight right out of her, sent her back down the stairs to inhabit her own troubled mind, leaving me out of it. I was tired and sick with crying, and I wanted it over. I didn't know what over meant. I stepped aside, giving him full access to my mother, and waited for the storm to calm. The sight of him had the same silencing effect as the last time. Mom's twisted face, her mouth hung open, and the yelling stopped. She stood and panted in the middle of my bedroom, staring up at a face of onyx nothing, and my own breathing calmed. She would leave again, and I'd be okay. But this starman didn't stop there. He stepped closer, looked down into my mother's face, and the pace of her breathing increased. Her expression didn't change, and her eyes stayed focused where they had been, where he'd been standing several seconds before. It was like she was frozen in place, and it struck me how vulnerable she was like that. The starman loomed closer still, leaning in, the smooth glass of his face shield almost touching my mother. I thought he might be studying her, wondering what made her tick and her springs come loose. Then he reached out, and in one fluid movement, he grasped her wrist and twisted her to the floor. She hit with barely a sound, just a muted huff of air, as the breath was forced from her lungs. He must have been holding her up by that twisted wrist, supporting her body weight on that fragile joint. It would have hurt like hell, but she never uttered another sound. The starman dragged her across my carpeted bedroom floor, the fabric of his jumpsuit making a low shushing sound as he moved. My mother's eyes remained fixed on the empty ceiling, her legs dragging boneless behind her. It took me too long to react, to move away from my vantage point against the wall, the place where I'd cowered away from her, but now I didn't know where she was going, where the starman was taking her. Muted thuds came from the narrow staircase that led to the main part of the house, and the last thing I saw was my mother's hair trailing down the steps, curling, auburn shot through with lighter threads, in need of a trim. It slinked down the last stair before the 90-degree turn took her out of sight. I should have followed them, maybe to stop what happened or even just to know, to see it for myself. Instead, I sat on the top step and waited for someone older than me to come and tell me what my new truth was. I didn't expect her to be gone, not forever, but that was what happened. Dad asked me questions over and over. What happened? Where were you? Where were you? I responded finally, and that shut him up. I didn't understand why back then, too naive to know what his constant absences and whispered phone calls signified. I wasn't concerned with that. My parents' marriage was inherently uninteresting. I wanted to know why he'd never been there for anything else, why he'd let me get pushed to the point where I'd offer a prayer to a dark God I didn't understand, one who was always listening, even if I couldn't see him. I couldn't ask those questions, and Dad wouldn't have been able to answer anyway. Over the next weeks and months, the only question we had left centered around whether Mom was ever coming back. Dad thought she would. He told me so every night before I went to bed, the dry skin of his face crinkling in an attempt at consolation. He was afraid of being alone with me, of having full responsibility for an adolescent, but I didn't mind it just being us. He left me alone for the most part, and life got quiet. I knew by then it would be permanent, that wherever the Starman took her, it wasn't the kind of journey that was ever round trip. I watched out my window on moonless nights, staring at the endless stars above. I didn't want her back. I was looking for him, until his memory slipped away from me again. After that, I just watched the night sky and didn't understand why, only that it gave me a sense of obsidian peace. That's where I'll end that one.
That was great.
Holy shit.
Thank you.
That was something.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I
That's
mean,
been a fun one. That one's gotten there's quite a bit more to it, but people seem to respond to it well, so that's been fun.
yeah, I mean, it packs so much emotion and kind of trauma into it, and it feels like completely appropriate for the two books that we're talking about today. Like, you took us on a journey. Like, I'm almost speechless, which, as Bob knows, does not happen often at all. Oh my goodness.
All right, so we're gonna do. Let me exit the full screen here so I can get to my. I've run through this a couple times.
Are we just jumping from one reading
Oh,
to the
well,
next?
I didn't know.
Do people need a moment? I mean, well, the people, me. I mean, when did you first conceive of the Starman?
I actually think it was something that I pitched to Ryan shortly
Yeah.
after we started working together. He was asking me what I was working on, what I thought I would work on next, and I sent him like 3 different pitches. And I don't think that this was even the one that he thought I should work on next. And I didn't, but it was something that was like originally sort of a different concept. And then I just sort of I find that a lot of times I love like this sort of stark horror element, right? Like an injury or a monster or something from the shadows, something that scares you. And then I find that the most effective way I can make use of it is to just pull it into the human world. Like,
Mm.
because none of us are ever interacting with horror in a vacuum. No one who walks into a room and, comes across a shadow that shouldn't be there or an apparition or anything is doing so without their own experience, without everything that's going through their head on a daily basis. So I find that I have an easier time getting into a story if I can pull that into it.
Yeah, and how long is the full version? Like, I'm totally invested in this. I want the full version.
I might be like I think it's maybe like 4 or 5,000 words. It's not like super long. It's too long for a reading.
Yeah.
And so that's not the beginning of it either. Like there's some lead up stuff, but I kind of just wanted to select like the middle piece that would give us, give kind of the imagery and give some of the action to it that, that I wanted.
Yeah, it's truly spectacular
Oh,
writing,
thank you.
and like, yeah, just like as I say, so emotionally effective, and like, it makes me think of elements of like my childhood, and like, like complicated feelings and trauma. And it's funny, as like horror fans, it's like, wow, you're making me think of trauma. This is brilliant. Like,
I know.
no, this is the only kind of genre where we can say this. But yeah, I not only do I want to like read the piece in full, but I feel like, I want to dissect it. This feels like a piece where it's gonna benefit from multiple rereadings and really analyzing it. And we can, because you said it's out, it's in your collection.
Yep. Yep. It's in the collection. Everyone knows this.
All right. Well, let's jump into the other reading then, which is a little different. So, me and Laurel are going to read a story called Things We Say, which I originally wrote for Dark Moon Digest. And then it was also aired on the No Sleep podcast.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, thank you. And then later, I wrote an audio drama, so dialogue only, which was on a podcast called Miscreation. So Laurel and I are going to perform the audio drama version, and we'll see how that goes. So if you're ready, I will be playing the character Jack, and you will be Bea, although many people seem to pronounce it B, but it was intended as Bea.
Oh, good to know. Okay, Bea. All right.
Yeah,
Good.
but I don't think you need to refer to
No, well,
yourself,
no, but
unless
it's good to know.
yeah, unless you're like you do, like some actors, they add in their own lines. You're like, hello,
I'm
I
gonna
am
ad lib.
Bea. I am Bea, and I am here
Yes.
to say something to you, Jack. Laurel, that's not what it says in the script.
No. I'll try really hard not to do that.
Okay, so let's begin. Can a Santoku knife cut through human bone? Let's have a look. Over 16 million results and not a single answer. How fascinating.
Jack, are you gonna be much longer?
Reviews of Santoku's, comparisons with other knives, some YouTube videos, but no definitive answer about.
Jack, if you're not coming, just let me know and I'll.
Yes, I'm coming. Jesus Christ. Now, this knife right here, this is the real deal. A 3-in-1 knife for slicing, dicing, and mincing.
Jack, who are you talking to?
No one, darling. Just enough time to give it a quick test run. Open this fridge. Pork steak's too messy. Aubergine's not quite right. Ah, an apple.
Jack, I swear to God, you better not be cutting up food again with that bloody knife. You've wasted enough money already.
Absolutely not, Bea. Just putting some things away. Let's take this. Guess you'll have to wait a little longer, my Santoku friend.
Finally, you work too hard.
I'm not so sure about that.
You're a professional artist, living the dream, living your dream.
I don't feel like a professional artist, barely feel like an unprofessional artist. More like a fraud.
No, darling, don't say that. You know that's not true. Now stop standing around and get in bed.
If it wasn't for your teaching job, I wouldn't get to do any of this. Mid-30s and I'm living off my wife's income.
You're too hard on yourself. Last month, you made more than me. New commissions every week, work displayed in international exhibitions. If that's not success, then what on earth is it?
A fluke, Bea. It's a fluke. At least the cicadas are happy.
Ugh, that's one word for him. Should we shut the.
No, they keep me grounded. I don't think I'll ever have a midlife crisis because every day contains a mini crisis, a moment where I utterly despise myself and everything I've become.
I know, darling. I know. But if you had a choice, you.
Wouldn't be an artist. I know. I know. Bea, do you ever want to kill yourself?
Hmm. I mean, not really, but sometimes I want to stop living.
I hear you.
I read about this one guy who killed his girlfriend and kept it from her family and friends for months.
For real?
Oh, yeah. He just used her social media accounts and smartphone to post updates, answered text messages, that kind of thing. Oh, say, I wonder which of us could get away with it for longest. Like if I killed you or you killed me.
Hmm. It's an interesting question. Living here in Portugal, while our parents are in England, most of our friends too, I reckon we could both conceal it for a while. Honestly, I think you could keep it from my parents for several months, at least until my birthday. And even then, you could come up with some excuse they'd buy as to why I couldn't Skype.
That's true. And your text messages are briefer than mine. I think it'd be easier for me to fake being you than it would you being me. Besides, your parents would ask way less questions. Mine would demand more, growing increasingly suspicious if you refused to Skype. And then there's my sisters. I send them messages most days.
Please, I reckon I could handle a few text messages, especially with your sisters. A couple of memes, some jokes here and there. Got it covered. And I think of something to tell your boss too. Some reason as to why you could no longer work. A breakdown, perhaps. I think they go for it and eventually fire you with few questions. I guess a boss that doesn't give too much of a shit has its advantages.
For you in this unique predicament, sure.
Plus, I'd keep everyone updated, keep my social media presence heavy too, played a supportive and troubled husband. People would respect my space and sympathize with the difficult time I was having. Oh, he's ever so good sticking by her throughout all of this. I can't imagine what they're going through. That's what people would say. Of course, it would be easier to keep it from your work and colleagues than it would your family. But if you killed me, well, you'd have the opposite problem. I might not call my parents often, but work is a different matter. You'd have to keep my online presence up.
Right. And you have so much work commissioned. There are things I don't even know about.
And don't forget the podcast and the online artist workshop. I kept them both running when I had pneumonia. And remember the shoulder operation I had when we were living in Croydon? Still managed to edit and release the podcast every week, even though I couldn't use my right arm.
You're crazy. You'd continue to work if your legs were cut off.
Well, obviously, Bayer, you think people with no legs are useless now. Honestly, that's not very progressive of you.
You know that's not what I meant. I meant you work hard against all odds. Damn it, you're awful. You know it was a compliment. I just phrased it badly.
I know, I know.
You're a dickhead.
Anyway, guess it's settled. I could conceal your murder for longer.
Not so fast, mister. I just asked Rob to do the podcast solo. Get him to run the workshops too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he'd be delighted. Especially as he has nothing to do with the workshop, so logistically, I've no idea how that'd even work. And besides, Rob doesn't even know how to edit podcasts. He can't even record a Skype call. You'd have to explain all of that while masquerading as me. Plus, you'd have to come up with something convincing to explain my absence on social media and lack of commitment to professional endeavors. You'd need to stage something major.
Hmm. A full on meltdown and suicide attempt, perhaps?
You know, that could do it, Bayer. Really, that's not bad at all. People wouldn't ask many questions and they'd accept the break from work, would encourage it even. They'd say, take as much time as you need. Come back when you're ready. Of course, the whole suicide attempt would make it harder to go without a Skype call to my parents. I like to think they'd at least want to talk face to face after that.
Right. And they might visit too.
Not a chance. They don't even have passports. Matter of fact, I don't reckon they'd show up if I was on the edge and told them I'd kill myself if they didn't visit. They'd call my bluff. And if it resulted in my death, they'd just say it was meant to be. God's will or something.
I'm sorry.
My brother, though, he's a different story. He probably would book a flight. So, if you wanted to kill me, you'd have to achieve some sense of balance, a reason strong enough to justify an end to my business endeavors, but not so extreme as to have him visit Portugal.
Hmm. Difficult. But I still think I could keep it going for longer than you. Mom and dad like to Skype me every few weeks, and I can't just say no. I'm not like you. You're stubborn and pretty blunt when it comes to your parents. Assertive.
Assertive, huh? Almost. Think the word you're looking for is asshole. I do think I could make it work with your parents, though.
You love a good challenge.
Oh, Bayer, you are so right. I do love a good challenge. And like you said, I'm stubborn. I'd just give them the impression you'd had a change in attitude, a colder, meaner Bayer. I'd phase it in, of course. It wouldn't be a sudden switch. Oh no, that would arouse too much suspicion. But I've got a good feeling about this. I think I could pull it off. I really do. I mean, shit, there was a time when you didn't speak to them for over 12 months.
Teenage angst. It wouldn't work now.
Guess we'll have to agree to disagree. The cicadas, they're getting louder.
Well, we'll never know. I mean, we can't both simultaneously kill each other and conceal the deaths. That would be impossible.
Impossible.
Do you think you could ever kill me?
I don't know. I mean, is it possible? Could I physically do it with the right tools? Probably. But mentally, could I? You're my wife, Bea. That's not a good answer, is it? Should have just said no. The cicadas. They're here. Say, Bea, can a Santoku knife cut through human bone?
A Santaku knife? Wait, why are you asking me?
It's just words, darling. Things we say. Nothing more. And that is the reading.
I love that. I had no idea where it was going. I had no
Mhm.
idea where it was going when I first read it.
And y'all didn't rehearse that or anything?
No,
No.
no.
No, I read through it a couple
good.
times after you sent it to me.
That was good. That was really good. I enjoyed the hell out of that.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thanks for letting me read it with you. That was fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only drawback is, of course, with the audio adaptation, we got some sound effects, but I tried my best to make it work. Added some very marginal additional dialogue. Nothing
We
like "Hi, I'm Bea," but
we we could have had Bob be the cicada.
can you
I
imagine?
can't do that sound, that annoying
Like,
cicada sound.
shh. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. I can't do it. I can hear it, but yeah.
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 Everyone can hear it. God,
Hmm.
those things are loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
if
it's usually
people,
like maybe one of them. It's like, you loud
mm,
little bitch.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I want to go back and listen to that on. You said it was on Miscreations.
Yeah, the exact audio version that we just read is on Miscreation, so I can put a link to that in the show notes, and then it is also on the No Sleep podcast, but that one may be behind a paywall, but I think it's like a a reasonably affordable paywall, so it depends how much people enjoyed it. But I will put a link right now to Miscreations for everyone on YouTube, and we'll have that in the show notes as well. So that is Miscreations. It is episode 2, and that was a really cool experience actually, because Miscreations was a offshoot from Hawk and Cleaver's The Other Stories podcast. And so, I mean, the other stories, they're like straight readings, more akin to No Sleep podcast. But with Miscreations, there's not many episodes. There's only 5 of them, but they were all recorded in a studio, in the ACAS studio, in fact, in London. And for that, I actually went and I met the 2 actors that played Jack and Bayer, and so like
Fun.
I sat in on the recording. Like, you don't hear me. I don't like who's that cicada.
Yeah.
No, like, there's no.
Cicada number 2.
But that was just a really fun experience for me to, like, in person, watch them deliver the lines, and they could ask me like if I had any directions or things like that. So yeah, recommended if you get an opportunity to watch people perform your work live, definitely go for it.
Well, I feel like that's one of those ones that uh is very illustrative of what you can do with the idea, the growing tension of possibility without naming anything specifically, you know?
Right.
It's because it's just not it's just it's thoughts, and you don't exactly know where it's going, and the cicadas are, kind of freaky, and it's just sort of building, but without ever like hitting anything on the nose. So it's really,
Mhm.
really good tension building.
Yeah. Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you very much. And I've also put the link to the No Sleep podcast episode as well. Like I was very impressed with both adaptations. So 2 for 2 on that one. But in terms of adaptations, is there any news or anything you can say? I mean, you said that Ryan Lewis has read Silent Key. Is there any
Mhm.
movement in terms of films? Obviously, at the moment, there's a distinct lack of movement for for anything in Hollywood, given we only just resolved the writer's strike, and there's
Mhm.
still the actors' strike is ongoing. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering where you are with that, or if that indeed is something you can even talk about.
There's really nothing to talk about. We've had interest. We've had some folks request manuscripts on a few things, especially the Day of the Door. And so I know that some people have stuff in hand, but I haven't really heard anything. So I mean, you know how it works. It's a whole lot of hurry up and wait. So no, there's not really anything to report on it. But I did get to do something fun into last year, beginning of this year. Shadows at the Door. I don't know if you listened to that podcast. It's Mark Nixon and David Alt, and it's a really really good you know, dramatization podcast, and Mark asked me to write an audio script. So I did that for the first time. I really told him I thought he had the wrong person. I was like, there's got to be someone else you're trying to reach, because I've never done that. But he was able to walk me through it really well, and that was a great experience. And he was able to sort of redirect me. He wanted it to be set in Britain, and so he was able to help me with all of my really bad British slang the throughout working on it. But it was really fun. And when you were talking about being in the studio with the people performing yours, that sounds like it would be really fun. That's if they
Yeah.
were not all the way across the ocean, I would have maybe requested to make the attempt. But David Alt might not have been happy and not be like leaning over his shoulder the entire time. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it might be cool for us as writers, but I do imagine it puts additional pressure on the actors. I mean, I tried to lean not too close. I wasn't like Hansi Man, like just if people wonder who is Hansi Man. Well, all of the episodes with Laurel, this is like a series. It's canon. You've got to go back to the first time we ever spoke with Laurel on This Is Horror podcast to get that
oh my
reference.
gosh, I wonder if that guy has any idea he's become canon. Probably not.
But I mean, speaking of David Alt, who to the best of my knowledge is not Hansi Man,
He
he's
does
done.
not seem to be.
Yeah, he has done I mean, he could be like a reformed Hansi Man, but there's absolutely no evidence. There's as much evidence that David Alt is Hansi Man as there is that Cemetery Gates Media get all of their money through blood money, as Max Booth tried to suggest in the conversation that we had, which hasn't aired yet. So it's always fun to reference things that nobody but me has actually heard.
It's the ultimate meta reference.
Yeah, but David O, he has done a number of things for the No Sleep podcast. In fact, he is in the episode that I linked to, with Things We Say. He's not on Things We Say, but he is on the Halfway House, which is before Things We Say. So if you're an ultimaniac, there's another reason to get that episode.
And everyone should be an Ultimaniac because he's pretty damn awesome.
Yeah. Is that the
Mark
sound bite?
Mark does some great work too. I believe his first speaking role was as the Death Spider, which was just enthralling. So
Yeah. No, I've heard many good things about their podcast, so should probably put that in the show notes as well. There's going to be extensive show notes for this one. But we've got a few questions from Patreon. So, well, the first two we've got from Robert Stahl. He said that they're for Laurel, but I see no reason why we can't all give some thoughts on this. So the first is, the topic is best modern female horror authors. Go. that is the question. Some would argue that's not a question, that's a statement.
it's a prompt. It's a prompt.
Yeah.
I like it. It is so hard to do that without being terrified you're going to leave some folks out. So this is by no means uh, exclusionary. It's not the final word in it, but I always have to say Haley Piper, because she's really excellent, and she's inventive, and she's just doing completely new things with the genre, and I just always enjoy everything I read of hers. Caitlin Marceau is she's doing some incredible things. Her novella, This Is Where We Talk Things Out, like she sent it to me to blurb, and I never do this because I usually just like read and then I send a blurb. But like I was DMing her in the middle, like, what the fuck is this? Why is it so good? I hate you and I love you at the same time. You suck. But no, it's like it's so good. It's really, really excellent. Laura Keating's Agnes Lodestone that came out through Tenebris Press is if you've seen I don't want to give it away, so I'm not going to say that, but it's very it's different, it's dark, it's confusing, and she just but in like the best way. Like it's so eerie, it's so creepy, and she does the family dynamics just beautifully. And then I'll just Rhonda Joseph Jackson, her collection, um, Hell Hath No Sorrow Like a Woman Haunted, which is, by the way, one of the best titles like of all time. Um, it's absolutely excellent. So yeah, there's see, and I can go on forever. So someone else is gonna have to talk, or I'm just gonna never stop.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's almost an impossible question where you know that you'll miss people out, but the two who immediately spring to mind are Anya Alborn, who I know is probably one that would have sprung to mind for Bob, as I think it was Bob who introduced me to Anya to begin with. I mean, like if you were to make like an easy comparison, you'd say like the female Jack Ketchum, but then like that is unfair because it's like, no, this is the original fucking Anya Alborn,
Right.
you know, who stands alone in her own right. And then the other person who really comes to mind is Gemma Moore. Just everything
Oh
she
yeah.
does, I absolutely devour and love that. If we're to take horror wider, which you know I often do, then I love A.M. Holmes's work. Now, a lot of that, I guess you would put in the more general literary category, but The End of Alice is a brutal, dark, fucking horrible story at times, and it's so well done. And really recently, I've discovered, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, so apologies, but Mona Awad. I've been reading Bunny. It is so good. It is so well done. I'd also throw Alyssa Nutting, who wrote Tampa, into the mix, but we're barely even scratching the surface here. I'm just naming, you know, some of the female horror authors that I've enjoyed recently, but there are like countless others. I mean, I thought that Stephanie Parent did a fantastic job with the Briars and
Oh
like
yeah.
such an authentic, unflinching um like piece on sex work, but also like wrapped in a gothic horror story with kind of the spirit of Shirley Jackson. So there's a lot of people doing great work. It's an impossible question.
It really
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to add to the mix, and she's certainly not new, but it seems like that she, you know, comes out Sarah Langan. Just
Oh yeah.
yeah, she, you know, her work before was, you know, really good, but I think she's hit like next level, especially with, you know, Good Neighbors. That book, man, that knocked me for a loop. And I think she's got another one. She's tapped into this I guess this community neighborly dynamic that I don't know. It kind of, in a way, kind of reminds me of Anne River Siddons, especially, you know, The House Next Door, being that that's the only book I've ever read by her, and it's the only horror book she ever wrote. But dealing with you know, your community and your neighbors, that's just, there's some creepy shit there, man. People are fucked
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, and for some reason you mentioning Sarah Langan, like then just like brought Elizabeth Hand to mind, who wrote Wilding Hall, and I know that she's got a new book, A Haunting on the Hill, which is
Mhm.
like, I mean, the first ever novel authorized to return to the world of
Mhm.
Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. So that's got to be on
Mhm.
everyone's to
Oh,
read list, surely.
I gotta.
Christine Morgan.
Mhm.
Christine Morgan is just outrageously talented, and she's so funny, and she's so brutal, and she just holds her own with any author. Christine Morgan is just absolutely amazing.
She is like, to me, she's like the epitome of what you would think. She writes hard the way that you would think it should be written, and she is the sweetest
Oh yeah.
person that you would ever meet. Just so with a wickedly brutal sense of humor. But she's really really talented.
Mm.
Uh, Another one, and I'm reading this book. I feel like I'm gonna be reading it forever because it's so long, but it's good. Mariana Enriquez, Our Sheriff
Hmm.
Knight.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I've heard of that one.
And I read it, and it's or I'm reading it. It's long, but it's good. It's that long good that you want to, you want to savor it. And
Mm.
it deals with the occult, and it deals with a man who's trying to save his son from people who are powerful in the occult. And it's set in 1970s Argentina, and it's just wild.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we say, we've only just scratched the surface.
Hmm.
That is not the definitive
No.
list of the best modern female horror authors. What that is just some amazing authors that we enjoy,
Hmm.
and that happened to come to mind today. If you asked us tomorrow, which I guess you could ask me and Bob tomorrow, we'll be here, then we probably have a different answer.
Hmm.
But this is an interesting question. So the second question from Robert Stoll: what is the craziest thing you have witnessed at a book convention?
Oh God. Yeah, it was the Bourbon and Books panel at Imaginarium. I foolishly thought that that meant we were, like, gonna, like, maybe drink some bourbon and talk about books, or, talk about bourbon and drink books. I didn't know, but it's actually has to do with pounding shots. Um, and yeah, I ended up on that panel and had no idea what it was gonna be, and no one would really tell you. It was just, you're like, "So what exactly we're doing?" And they're all like, You'll see." And I'm like, "Oh, this is starting to feel like I've gotten myself into something." Yeah, so that was pretty rough. 'Cause it was also that, so we were doing a round robin story where someone would say one line and take their shot, and then the next person would take their shot and give a line, and you go around. Now, when everyone's only giving, I think they only did it this way once. I think previously they had done it to where there was more of a break between. But this time it was just pounding shots. And the other wrinkle to it is, if somebody tapped out and didn't want to take their shot, the next person had to not only take their shot, but the person who tapped out. And so if you had like 4 people tap out in a row, you got some poor dude with like 5 in front of him. And, it's just funny. It's like I'm an adult. Like, at the time I was like 40. I'm 41 now, so yeah, it was last year, so I was 40. And I'm like, I had this moment of peer pressure where I was like, I'm a Kentucky bitch. These people aren't gonna, no, I'm not gonna let these men do. Then I was like, actually, yes, I am. Yes, I am, because I have no desire to be just like, passed out, face down in a hotel conference room. So it got, yeah, there was an ambulance involved. It wasn't me. So everyone ended up okay, but I don't think they do that panel anymore.
So, like, when does it end? Does it end when there's a complete story, or does it end when there's one person left?
It
When the
ends when there's
ambulance
one.
shows up.
It basically, yes, it ends when there's one person left. It ends when there's one person left, and the 2 last guys standing were just, like, shot for shot. Like, they stuck it out way longer than the rest of us. I was talking people out of taking their shots. I was like, listen, because I always end up being everyone's mother accidentally at things. And I'm like, honey, you don't have anything to prove. You'll put that down, sweetie. Okay. So, the rest of us survived. But yeah, those two guys were just slamming them till the very end. And then, yeah, everyone's okay now, though. All's well that ends well.
How many people started off?
I want to say 7 or 8. It wasn't like a huge number. It wasn't a
Do
huge
you
number.
do you want to divulge at which point you tapped out of the 7
Number,
or 8?
I think after I took 4 shots. And I should have done it at least one before that. My initial thinking, because I don't do shots. I have not done them in ages.
Mm,
I drink bourbon, but I drink bourbon on the rocks and I, drink
yeah.
it at a reasonable, speed. And I know that my limit of like comfort if I'm drinking at home is 4. And so I thought,
Mm.
okay, well, I can do 4, but I wasn't thinking like, oh, but this is shots and that's not the same thing. So I was okay, but I was definitely uh I would not have wanted to be any more inebriated than that. So sorry, Carl, you were the guy sitting next to me and I ended up accidentally giving you my drink too. Sorry, man. He was a good sport about it.
All right. How about you, Bob? Have you got any wild, crazy convention stories that you're prepared to say on air?
Yeah, I've mentioned it before, and but for those that have never heard it, the first time I went to uh, KillerCon is in August in Austin, so it's in and it's Wrath James White, and it's basically where the Splatterpunk Awards are. Uh, and it's celebration of Splatterpunk extreme horror. It's a very open and welcome and family and very 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 cool and great convention to go to. And so my very first one I went to, they have a gigantic banner that they post out at the when you walk in to the convention center, and it's a knife and it has blood on it. It says Killer Con, this banner's like 12 feet. It's big, and what's basically on their website. And so you see that when you sign in and when you walk in. So in this convention center at this hotel, we had like the whole bottom floor. There's a second floor and a third floor, and they have different events for different companies and things like that. And so right past that, there's a place where you can get a coffee, and go into the panels and stuff like that. And they had a gigantic coffin filled with donuts. So I'm setting the scene here because I think it was the first night, or it may have been the second night. They still had that coffin out there with the donuts and still had that banner out there. And we had to share. And I'm pretty sure we were doing the gross out contest, which they do a gross out contest. You have to read a story. You get 3 minutes, and then applause gets you to keep going. And I think while we were doing that, that's when we were told that there was going to be a funeral wake in the floor above, and they were passing through the Killer Con entrance, and there wasn't really anything we could do or anyone could do probably to get that coffin out of there. But that was pretty wild. Just the thought of it, I thought that was pretty funny. And then the next year, I think during the same thing, because it's the same event, they had a mariachi band that was playing. It was the girl's the Mexican 16-year-old birthday. I can't think what the word is.
Quinceanera.
Yes. And so while in the middle of like the presentation, you get that, like going, what the hell, man? So I was like, well, this at least is better than the funeral, but yeah, it was, yeah, that's to me, that, ghoulish. It wasn't outrageous, but Max and Lori got married and it was beautiful.
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah,
and
that was good.
that was a highlight. There was nothing outrageous about that though. We knew it was going to happen, and it was. I
It was
think Andrew was a little outrageous, you know.
he was, but like perfectly so. Best
Right? Yeah.
best wedding ceremony ever. Also, just to
Mm,
give you a quick shout out, Bob, I don't even know if you realize this, but like, so I may have told you, I don't know because I have very little recollection of much that I said that weekend. When I got up that morning to go to the airport, I felt like I'd been roofied. I hadn't had a drink in like weeks at that point. I still don't know what it was. I don't know if it was vertigo or what, but I was way out of my mind. And several times during that weekend, I would sort of come back to myself and realize I've been talking to someone for like a long period of time and have no idea what the hell I was saying. And I think I did that to you at least twice. And you were always like really, really nice and really chill about it. So
mhm.
I appreciate you. Just you and Lucas Mangum, poor guy. I think I did it to him a couple times too. So that's a real shout out to that convention though, is you can go into it essentially roofied and be perfectly safe and fine. So
Mhm.
yay, ghoulish.
Well, I didn't realize that anything, was going on. Uh,
That's good. Even if you're just telling me that, that's good.
but I mean, I know our perception of how we see ourselves and react to ourselves is a lot different than what people see. You know, uh, because I know that I've had some perceptions of things that I've said or done, or shoot, just the way I fucking walk somewhere, and I think back going, man, they probably thought I was pretty pissed off about something, you know. I hope I didn't scare them, And you're thinking these thoughts later, and you get, and then you try to get into a conversation with somebody, and you're like, what? No, hold on, I was thinking about something. So, but was it like were you like on pain pills or something, or?
No, I had not. I still don't know what. I don't know if it's an exhaustion thing or what. It was really, really, really weird. It was very disorienting, very disorienting. Um, Yeah, so sorry to derail it to a point. I wanna get to what Michael's was, but I hadn't had an opportunity to tell you, that I appreciated that because I don't know, it's particularly as a woman when you go to these events, like, I've never felt that way, like, at Ghoulish or AuthorCon or anything like that, but it honestly is a little bit of a vote of confidence. It's like you can I was not intentionally inebriated at all, but just
Mm-hmm.
sort of outside of my control, I felt this way and was very much out of my head and still was completely safe and fine all weekend. So I mean, I really do think that's testament to how good the community is. So, anyways, sorry, I have a tendency to derail.
No, I'm just so glad that you're okay, kind of
Mm-hmm.
now, and like I think it is testament to how good, like the vast majority of the community is,
Hmm.
and I feel like in this community, if there's any bullshit, for want of a better word, there are so many people who will not only call it out, but will jump in and will see that it's dealt with. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's
mm,
that. And I'm if I'm at a con, and any woman or anybody, if you feel uncomfortable about something, let me know. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm going to tell the people who need to be told, and they're going to do what they're supposed to do. But I mean, if you feel like that there's someone who is messing around with you, we need to know. It's important for anything at all. Just let us know.
yeah, it's a good message, and the only way to segue is for me to get into my
Tell your outrageous
busiest
story.
story, which like I've mentioned this before. It's not at a con, but it's a book event, and it was the launch of Joseph DeLacy's Blood Fugue. And so it was a This Is Horror event. We had Joseph DeLacy reading, the legend that is Pat Cadigan reading, and Jonathan Green. And the host was Jasper Bach. Jasper Bach is I love Jasper Bach, and he writes comedic horror. He is a comedic person. And, we did a thing at This Is Horror events where we wanted them to be memorable. We wanted to do something that would get people talking. And so for the Blood Fugue event, somebody had made some blood fudge. And I am not encouraging that anyone does this, particularly at a Blackwell's bookstore that we haven't been back to since. But me, Jasper, and Joseph decided it would be funny if we pretended that Jasper Bach had some sort of reaction to this fudge that turned him into a zombie, and he then attacked Joseph DeLacy. So Pat Cadigan, who is now 70, so I guess he was 60s at the time, time moves forward, did not know. She's a very respected author. And the other author, Jonathan Green, did not know. And so we eat the fudge, and then like Jasper's the host. Halfway through, he's like, sorry, I've got to take a break. He goes backstage. What nobody knows is backstage we've got a makeup person who's making Jasper look visibly more ill. And then there's a video of all this on YouTube, which I'm going to link to. and then when he comes in, he starts kind of convulsing.
Oh,
And at that point, which we didn't anticipate this would happen, but people started getting their phones out to potentially ring an ambulance.
Oh, God.
So then, like, we had to escalate things quite quickly for, like, Jasper kind of, like, just attacks and knocks Joseph DeLacy to the floor. They have a fight. They knock, like, a Blackwell's display over. And then Jasper jumps into the audience, at which point the video you can see on YouTube ends. But we weren't invited back to to Blackwell's again. This was 2012. Oh, it was a different time back then. That was the craziest thing that we did. That was the craziest stunt that we've done at a This Is Horror event. Like, that's only a few years into This Is Horror. Like, there are things that I've done that I wouldn't do now, but it got people talking. Like, maybe, like, for some people, this event is somewhat anticlimactic because we do often have an incident, like for the girl in the video, Max Booth hacking into the cooler cache. But, it's been a difficult year. It's post-COVID. It's 2023. You can't get away. You can't pretend someone's having an allergic reaction. Ambulances are called, and then he attacks the author and jumps into the audience. Can't do that, but you could then. You probably couldn't then, but we did it anyway. So there's your answer, Robert Stahl. I hope that was a good one for you.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, we're honestly more than out of time.
Yeah.
So, do either of you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
Get A House of Bad Memories. Read it. Review it favorably upon all of your preferred platforms. But seriously, it's an absolute ride of a book. It's well written. It's completely batshit. And you're gonna love it.
I'll add to that. Buy Laurel's book, Silent Key. It's out now too, and y'all need to get it and read it and review it favorably.
Yeah.
Thank you.
House of Bad Memories and Silent Key. So until next time, which for me and Bob is in 53 minutes with Alan Baxter, take care of yourselves. Be good to one another. Read horror. Keep on writing and have a great, great day.